Welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. I'm Edie Hill in for Rob. Happy New Year to start it all off. 2025 didn't just break the record for social service fraud investigations, it shattered it. The Department of Justice called it the largest takedown in U.S. history, over $14.6 billion in alleged fraud. Now, to put that in perspective, that's double the previous record. It's not just a leak in the bucket anymore. It is a hole the size of a canyon, and each day brings shameful cases. President Trump addressed the staggering amounts of fraud overtaking our country last night.
They stole $18 billion. That's just what we're learning about. That's peanuts. In California is worse, Illinois is worse, and sadly New York is worse. A lot of other places. So we're going to get to the bottom of all of it.
Well, let's start at the federal level with Medicare Advantage. That's a new frontier. They're seeing upcoding on a scale that feels like science fiction. Companies using AI to scour patient records, not to find better treatments, but to find misdiagnoses that trigger higher payouts. It's called risk score manipulation. They're turning a little short of breath into congestive heart failure with the click of a button, all to pad the bottom line. At the state level, there's a guy in Virginia injecting patients with medical ozone gas. That's basically toxic air, and then billing it as nerve blocks. There was Operation Allograft, where fraudsters were applying expensive, unnecessary wound grafts to elderly hospice patients who were just trying to live out their final days in peace. They weren't treating wounds, they were harvesting billing codes. In San Francisco a year ago, federal investigators uncovered 5 retailers running a massive welfare ring. Instead of selling groceries, they were essentially acting as illegal ATMs. So here's how it worked. Low-income residents went in with their EBT, that's their food stamp cards, to the stores. The owner would then swipe the card for, say, $200 worth of groceries. But there were no groceries. The store owner and the customer just split the cash. By the time the DOJ stepped in, there'd been more than $4 million in fake transactions. Also in California, just 2 months ago, a couple running several hospice companies was convicted of defrauding Medi-Cal and Medicare of $1.4 million. First, they paid kickbacks to doctors to recruit patients for hospice. But many of the patients weren't even terminally ill. Did that matter? Not a chance. The couple used them to bill the government for expensive end-of-life care. I could go on and on with examples of the staggering amount of social services fraud in this past year alone. But we haven't even gotten to the state capturing most of the attention now, Minnesota. $14 million in fraud at just one autism clinic called Smart Therapy. The fraudsters hiring teenagers, usually relatives, 18-year-olds with no training, and calling them behavioral technicians. And when they couldn't find enough kids with autism, they started paying parents in the Somali community $400 to $1,500 per child to use their names for fake autism certifications. And it expanded quickly, with annual funding requests reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, real families in Minnesota who needed social services desperately, waiting for years, while the names of kids with no issue were used to bilk the government. These crooks were paying for real estate in Kenya, vacations, cars with money meant for autistic children. And, of course, we can't overlook the recent viral video showing numerous state-funded Somali daycare centers where an investigative journalist found no children and highlighted that the huge sign for the Quality Learning Center was misspelled. It has been painted over as of tonight. And then our own reporter, Joe Mahler, went to several state-approved and funded Somali daycare centers. He was also told that there were no children there, and ironically also found misspellings. The toddler program was advertised as being for toddlers. Citizen journalists across the country are hitting the streets, knocking on doors of alleged fraud daycare centers from Washington state to Ohio, and are finding similar things to Nick Shirley, empty buildings that appear like a child never stepped inside. But in Minnesota, the fraud is so bad and so prevalent that the federal government paused funding for the state. Now the state's demanding proof of the services provided, including names. And that's where it kind of enters the absurd. The timing is almost cinematic. Federal agents swarming Minneapolis, the money spigot from D.C. cranked shut, and the state finally asking for receipts, not just how many kids, but things like attendance logs, names, proof. And then, like a plot point from a bad heist movie, one of the Somali daycare centers reports that someone bust through their wall in the middle of the night. Interestingly, they claim the bad guy bypassed the cash, ignored the computers, and headed straight for the filing cabinet. Here was the account from the daycare manager.
Today, I want to talk about what happened yesterday. The suspect came in from the back, broke in from the back kitchen. Our office doors was broken into as well. We saw that, unfortunately, there was important documentation, enrollment of the children, and also employee documentation that was gone.
Yep, they claim the sensitive records are gone. Payroll, client files, the exact things the auditor needs to see. So one day the state shows up and says, show us the kids. The next day a burglar takes the paperwork. It is a miracle of coincidence. It is the Minnesota version of the dog ate my homework, only the dog is a sledgehammer and the homework is worth a few $1 million in taxpayer cash. Now, while many other media outlets are looking for ways to vindicate the criminals or simply ignore the fraud, we haven't, and Congress will soon start hearings to get to the bottom of it. Jeremy Christenson is a former Homeland Security investigator who spent years investigating this type of fraud and exposed the schemes going on. And Kristin Robbins is a Minnesota state representative who is set to testify about this fraud next week in Congress, and they both join us. Jeremy, it is good to talk to you again. Rampant fraud that you and I have discussed before in Minnesota is getting a lot of attention now. You've been working on it a long time. You started back in 2015, and then in 2018, the Minnesota Senate held a hearing, and a former Minnesota DHS employee very clearly laid out the fraud that was happening at these daycare centers. Listen to this.
Some of the things that I worked on, they were daycare frauds based out of Department of Human Services. They were overwhelming. The dollar amounts were upwards of 15 million. I tracked individuals overseas in countries that are not friendly to the United States, where they would spend months over there while they were operating their DHS daycare business.
Publications at the time also saying it was an open secret in the Somali community that starting a daycare center was basically a license to make money. So tell us about the things that you found in your investigations, Jeremy, and how was it able to continue despite people like yourself sounding the alarm?
Well, I have to say, I know your guest or the person you just had there on that video. I actually know him from my professional career. It happens because the people at the top in the state of Minnesota just simply did not want this to be known. They simply swept it under the rug. That's the only way it can be explained. They did not want this to come out. So the persons that were making these cases were chastised, demoted, reassigned, and belittled for the most part, and just told not to work on it anymore. It just went away.
Yeah, Kristin, very few of those, old media outlets, the CBSs and all those guys, are taking this seriously. Instead, they are attacking anyone exposing the fraud. NPR out with a piece where they call Nick Shirley an independent journalist with an agenda, and then go on to downplay any of the threats to his life, writing that he never cites specific attacks against him. The leftist media more interested in investigating Shirley than the accusations. So do you blame the media for playing a role in allowing this to go on for so long?
Absolutely. The mainstream media has ignored this locally and nationally for far too long. But we have had some really good investigative local journalists who have been digging in and reporting these stories. So we did have a good story last February about the daycare fraud, similar to what Mr. Shirley did. Of course, his went viral, and we're grateful for all the attention it's bringing to Minnesota. So, but there have been some good reporters, but I would say that's by far not reflective of the mainstream media, who has covered for Tim Walz for far too long.
Jeremy, listen to some reaction to the new scrutiny in Minneapolis.
There are people who are now going around, they're stalking members of the Somali community there just from how they look, questioning people, kind of taking it upon themselves to try to copy this influencer and do the same thing that he is doing.
It is communities that are in fear, children who won't even go to school because they're afraid of what may happen.
MS Now, fear-mongering. You were a Homeland Security investigation agent for a long time, headed up an array of investigations. In your experience with the cases, what kind of connection, if any, exists between the Somali community specifically and this type of fraud?
Oh, they're the A team when it comes to it. If there's an A team, a B team, and a C team, the Somali community is definitely the A team. Let's just put it that way. And yeah, they write the book on how to commit social service fraud within the United States. I think it's probably prerequisite learning before you enter the U.S. for them.
And I understand that when they were contacted, at the very beginning, Feed the Future, when they were contacted about investigations, they threatened to claim racism. I mean, in fact, they did claim that it was a racist attack against them. And they said, if you keep this up, we'll continue with the racism charges. And they were usually dropped. Is that correct?
Yeah, matter of fact, originally, I believe the governor did cut off funding originally when the investigation for feeding our starving children came out. But as soon as the racism charges started coming out and all their bigotry charges came out, they opened the tap again, and the governor and the persons on that side just didn't want to be labeled a racist, and they just opened the tap and let it run freely.
It is a key voting block, and there are a handful of counties that decide who runs the state. So I guess they didn't want to burn their bridges there. Kristin, you're headed to Congress on Wednesday to testify in this massive fraud scandal. So what sort of information, evidence will you bring, and do you think that Tim Walz should resign?
So I called for his resignation several weeks ago when he put out his so-called fraud prevention plan, which was really him appointing someone with no independence to start looking at this. It's far too little too late.
Wait, Kristin, let me just stop you there, because I'm sort of stunned by this. Instead of the governor telling the people who run the agencies to actually do their jobs and check on what they're sending money to, he hired somebody to oversee them. So he spent more money, hired more people to do the same job that the other people weren't doing, but he didn't get rid of them. That's, to me, shocking.
No, and that's been the problem all along. He has turned a blind eye for 7 years, despite many credible whistleblower reports, despite many Office of Legislative Auditor reports. Like, we've had dozens of hearings in my committee, and he hasn't taken any action to fire these people who are responsible for these programs and hold his agencies accountable for taxpayer money. So I think it's too little too late what he's been doing recently, and we absolutely need an independent inspector general in the executive branch. And when we had that bill pass the Democrat-led Senate last year, when it got to the House, his DHS commissioner testified against it. You cannot make this up.
No, and he's running for a third term. Lucky Minnesota. Jeremy, since the explosion of attention on the allegations of fraud there, whistleblowers across the country now are finding the same thing in their own states, they claim. So how widespread do you think this goes?
Oh, I think it's in any state that's got a large Somali population. Like I said, they've wrote the manual on this. It's not exclusive to one state. You can take the manual and go to any state, especially left-leaning states that are very liberal on their social service programs. I'm in the great state of Florida. I'd love them to come down and try it down here, because it just wouldn't fly down here.
All right, Jeremy Christenson and Kristin Robbins, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zohran Mamdani officially sworn in as mayor of New York City, and his to-do list is a gold mine for people who want lots of free stuff from the government using other people's money. Reaction from New York City Councilwoman Vickie Paladino next.
Whenever news breaks.
A lot of destruction there. It was really the front lines in the battle.
And wherever it happens.
And humanitarian corridors opened up this morning.
We're trying to go rescue a 96-year-old lady that doesn't have anybody to take care of her.
They're using ingenuity. They refuse to give up.
It's incoming fire. Come on. Yeah, let's get down here.
Newsmax is there for you.
Hungry Root is here, and I needed it because my fridge is super empty.
It's so easy to just whip together a quick, healthy meal.
Head to hungryroot.com for healthy groceries and simple recipes. Plus, get free veggies for life.
Doctor's Preferred Liver Defense is doctor developed to support your natural detox function with clinically validated, triple tested key ingredients to energize and renew your liver. Find Liver Defense in the supplement aisle at Walmart. Doctor's Preferred. Better science, better results.
Introducing X-Back from CopperFit, America's #1 back support brand. Our groundbreaking technology designed for compression support of your lower back and core like you've never experienced before. The X-Back evenly distributes the support across a broader surface area of your back for relief of lower back aches and pains. An orthopedic design alloy support panel and 4 built-in flexible stabilizers to help improve alignment and promote better posture. Available at getxback.com. Copperfit. Feel the difference.
WSOP presents the NFL Poker Experience. Rep your team. Compete in exciting NFL tournaments and win exclusive NFL Poker Championship rings. Download the WSOP free-to-play app for a chance to win $1,000 towards your favorite team merchandise.
I was elected as a democratic socialist, and I will govern as a democratic socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. What's radical is a system which gives so much to so few and denies so many people the basic necessities of life.
That was New York City's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, proudly kicking off the era of socialism in New York City, swearing in on the Quran next to Tish James last night, and then with Bernie Sanders this afternoon. But who's Mamdani really the mayor for? Is it the Holy Land Five, who he praised in a rap video, who were then convicted in 2008 of donating millions to Hamas? Perhaps it's the illegal aliens that he wants to provide a sanctuary city for. Or it could be the people of the South Africa Charter, for which he gave a shout out today. Watch.
Who does New York belong to? Well, my friends, we can look to Madiba and the South African Freedom Charter. New York belongs to all who live in it.
Last time I checked, New York does not belong to the South African Freedom Charter. Mamdani said he's a socialist, and after hearing him today, you would be a fool not to believe him. If you've got money, he wants it to redistribute to others. Countries in Europe are unrecognizable and struggling because they have caved into what Mamdani calls his abundance agenda. Everyone is welcome, and whatever you don't have, we'll take from someone else to give to you. The scary part, this may be becoming the new norm in America if more people like Mamdani get voted into office. Vickie Paladino, New York City Councilwoman, joins us now. Vickie, just a quick reminder of the mayor and what he represents, kind of like the best, the hottest hits here. Rent freeze, city-owned grocery stores, tax the rich, $30 minimum wage, sanctuary for LGBTQ, et cetera, community, stop ICE operations. And that's just a little bit of it. What's your reaction to the inauguration?
I thought I was in a third world country. I thought I was in a third world country. Everybody's getting on board as far as saying, let's cut him some slack. Let's see what he's going to do. This has been laid out for us now for months. He's made it very, very clear. He's been totally transparent. What the people of New York need to understand, people like us need to understand, is that the majority did not vote for this guy. Let's go over the base of who voted for Zohran Mamdani. The base that voted for Zohran was between 18 and 30 years old, has only lived in New York City between 7 to 10 years, some as little as 3. He had a very unique approach. Let's also be clear here. The DSA has been planning this for years. This is not something that has just popped up. They have decided to hijack the Democratic Party, and they have. And I think the higher-ups of the Democratic Party, what used to be the Democratic Party, should have stepped in and stopped this a long time ago. They did not. So what do we have? We have a bunch of weak people bowing to AOC, Bernie Sanders, burnt-out socialist, New Yorker born, moved to Vermont. For what reason? So that he could have his socialist agenda up there. AOC, who doesn't know her district, which is right next to mine, by the way, she actually shares part of my district. She never visits. She's never around. So what he's done here today is he has showed us once and for all, for real, in real time, this is now the Democratic Socialist city of New York. And he's not kidding around. And on my city council, we have got right now 18 self-proclaimed progressive caucus, which is made up of DSAs. So this guy's going to get a rubber stamp on a lot of the stuff he wants to do citywide. We saw Kathy Hochul take a knee Not once, but twice. And again today, you know, they're gushing about getting rid of millionaires. Well, half of them sitting, or 3/4 of them sitting up there today are all multimillionaires. So you know what? I think maybe we should start to dig into your pockets a little bit. And I think Kathy Hochul's, whose husband owns every concession stand in the stadium up in Buffalo, I think we should start to go after her money a little bit. You see, they claim they're for blue collar. They're not for blue collar. They're going to kill blue collar.
You make a very good point about, you know, who really elected this person. And it is a very small amount of people, basically in a primary, because you know the Republican isn't going to win in New York City. Here was Mamdani earlier saying the quiet part out loud with his socialist ideas. Listen.
We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
The warmth of collectivism. Wow. You know, I mean, I know a little bit about my Karl Marx history and that sort of thing. This stuff, you are right. He told you exactly what he was, what he is, what he will be, and you should have believed him. Literally almost communism at its finest. What are your thoughts?
Well, when I heard that, my skin literally crawled. Don't we want to be individuals? Don't we want to? I mean, they're all about LGBTQ rights and this person's rights and now they're different, right? They're not of the majority. We're talking a very small fraction of the people. But when you start to talk collectivism and you start to speak as he does, you are absolutely right. 100% you are right about this being right out of the straight books of Marx. And we've got ourselves a giant problem here. I want to see, I'm a big part of the New York City Council. As you could see, I'm very vocal. I don't hide how I feel. He doesn't like that much. And I will tell you that he's got a little problem with Vickie Paladino. Collectively, they have a problem with Vickie Paladino. So I want everybody to keep their eye on me. I'm going to ask you for some help here because they're looking to shut me down. And they're not going to do that.
All right. City Councilwoman from New York, Vickie Paladino. You got a big job ahead of you. Thank you very much for taking some time to join us.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. President Trump finishes off 2025 with a new round of drug boat strikes, but Maduro tries his hand at his own pressure campaign. What is it? Will it work? We discuss that after the break.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
You can't go out there. You'll never make it.
But I reckon I got to. I'm 45. It's time to screen for colon cancer.
Will I ever see you again?
I love you. Also, I'm just going to the porch.
I knew that. It's true. The Cologuard test comes to you.
Just ask your provider or request online.
That way you can screen for colon cancer on your terms. It's effective and non-invasive.
False positive and negative results may occur. It is not for those at high risk. Skip the drama. Ask your provider or request Cologuard online.
Last year, America's leading wireless provider spent $12 billion on advertising and promotions. That's billion with the B. Pure Talk? They hired me to make their commercials on my iPhone. Consequently, they can offer you unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data on a blazing fast 5G network for just $25 a month. Yeah, you can keep paying for those billion-dollar ad campaigns if you want, or you can start saving some real money when you switch to Pure Talk. Everything you need, nothing you don't.
For pain in multiple spots like here, here, or here, Salonpas patches stick firmly and remove comfortably once your pain is gone. Salonpas. It's good medicine.
This is the story of the one who knows that choosing Grainger for next day delivery and professional grade products can help him fly through the day like clockwork. Call, click, or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Order online and save $45. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code NEWS. That's urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code NEWS.
My name is Deanna Perazzo, and I'm a professional wrestler. I want to use my spotlight to help T2T because my husband was a combat veteran. Helping vets is so important because they're often the most disregarded people in our society. And so to be able to say, like, we see you, we see the sacrifice, we see the struggle you go through to support us in our scariest moments, that deserves to be celebrated, that deserves to be honored. Please help by donating $11 a month at T2T.org. Let us do good.
As a neurologist, my patients are often concerned with age-related memory decline. I recommend Cunol Brain Health with 2 powerful, high-absorption ingredients clinically shown to improve memory, focus, attention, and more. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Tensions continue escalating between Venezuela and the Trump administration as we head into this new year. This week alone, the U.S. military obliterated 5 drug boats, killing a total of 8 suspected drug traffickers. In retaliation, Venezuelan President Maduro is attempting his own pressure campaign, detaining more Americans in Venezuela in the months following the start of Trump's military and economic pressure, in the hopes of apparently of using them as bargaining chips in negotiations with D.C. The identities of most of the Americans detained in recent months unknown, but one has been identified as 28-year-old James Lucky Lang from Staten Island. Andres Martinez-Fernandez, senior policy analyst for the Latin America at the Heritage Foundation, and Tony Shaffer, retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, join us now. So, Andres, let me start with you. Does Maduro gain anything, any leverage by snatching up Americans?
No, it's a very dangerous thing. Venezuela's Maduro has used the seizing of hostages, U.S. hostages in particular, as a bargaining tool. And that has been effective, particularly under the Biden administration, where we saw that basically secure the release of their top money launderer back to Venezuela. However, we're dealing with a very different U.S. administration and U.S. president now. And I think that President Trump has very clear what the Maduro regime, a criminal regime, is angling at and attempting to do with this new strategy of targeting hostages and leveraging that. And I don't think that's going to work. And I think it's going to backfire pretty spectacularly for Nicolas Maduro.
Tony, in recent months, on many occasions, we've actually often seen Maduro dancing in front of crowds. You know, he's acting as if everything's great amid this escalating pressure. Is that a show, or could we see regime change in the near future?
Well, it was interesting. He actually sang, I think it was a John Lennon song. I'm surprised he didn't do a rendition of "We Are the World" for Christmas. But no, it's not gonna help. And I think him actually kidnapping Americans, the last times a dictator did that and really did it severely was Manuel Noriega back in 1989. And the result of that were military operations. I don't think we're going to invade Venezuela like we did Panama, but I think this opens the door for more severe direct special operations into the interior of Venezuela and more direct operations against Maduro himself. So I think it's a bad move. I think this just opens the door for more bad things to happen to Maduro.
Well, let's talk about another place with bad things happening. That's Iran. Protests erupting all over the country. Critically, they have been led by the merchants, then joined by everyone else. And the merchants, as a lot of people remember, were the ones behind the ouster of the monarchy and bringing in the Islamists. And they've been the backbone of support and legitimacy for this brutal regime ever since then, until now. It's so bad, the government ordered a near total shutdown as citizens crowd the streets chanting anti-regime slogans. So Iran and Venezuela have a strengthened relationship, Iran helping Venezuela circumvent a lot of those U.S. sanctions against them. Andres, how could a regime change or even just this unrest in Iran impact Venezuela and Maduro?
I think very significantly. That money launderer that I mentioned that the Biden administration sent back was actually one of the top people responsible for working with Iran to help Venezuela skirt U.S. sanctions on their oil sector. And Iran has undoubtedly been one of the top facilitators for allowing the Venezuelan criminal regime to survive that economic pressure from the U.S. So I think losing that will definitely hurt them in a way that they haven't felt before, and then create a new level of pressure. But it would be one of a string of changes, not only with authoritarian regimes, but across the hemisphere now, with elections going to conservatives across Latin America, the rise of Milei in Argentina, for example, and others. Venezuelan regime is losing allies quickly.
Tony, besides the regime change, protesters in Iran are also looking for overall better, decent living conditions. I mean, bare minimum living conditions. The sanctions definitely have hurt Iran's ability to provide energy to citizens. And believe it or not, they have been burning this toxic, I mean, literally toxic heavy fuel oil that even the regime acknowledges killed over 10,000 people last year. The air quality is so bad, it's placed them in the unhealthy for all category. And then along with the corruption, a drought and mismanagement of dams, there's also very little water. And it makes quality of life in the country unbearable, not to mention inflation that is out of control, so high people can't afford enough food. And then the regime announced that it wants to increase taxes 62% this year. Tony, what are your thoughts? What is the future of Iran?
So that's what you have when you have a dictatorship, essentially, a theocracy. And that's what the results have become, is horrible governance, people who long to have better conditions. And these are Persians. I always remind people, these aren't Arabs, they're Persians. Persians are much more essentially close to the Europeans in culture and perspective. And yeah, they expect to have a quality of life that actually allows for a family to survive. And one of the great ironies to your point, Edie, they have they have a great deal of oil, they have very little capacity to refine it. They got to send it somewhere else to refine it to get actually usable oil products, which is what you just referred to regarding the horrific conditions. But this whole thing may result in the government collapsing based on the people calling for a change. And I think that's the best thing that could happen to Iran, is for the people to take charge.
Absolutely. Andres Martinez-Fernandez and Tony Shaffer, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Edie.
Thank you.
There is a sad story that we are following from Switzerland tonight after a deadly fire broke out in a New Year's Eve celebration at a Swiss Alps resort bar. At least 40 people are now confirmed dead, more than 100 confirmed injured. The fire at the Constellation in the high-end ski resort town of Crans, Montana, was first reported around 1:30 a.m. local time. The small, really charming Swiss town is known for luxurious resorts. It attracts many of the world's rich and famous. And while the identities of the victims have not yet been identified, Swiss State Councilor Stephanie Granzer said that you can imagine on New Year's Eve that the population is quite young. We're talking about a young festive population. So our thoughts go out to all the families of the victims tonight, and we will continue bringing you the latest developments on this tragic story. A huge step into making America healthy again starts today as 5 states put restrictions on what SNAP can be used for. More next.
Bob Hope's comedic genius entertained fans for nearly 80 years through TV, movies, and countless live performances in front of active-duty military men and women. Newsmax TV will keep you laughing with a look back at his legendary career.
Healthy aging support starts here with the innovative nitric oxide science pioneered by Human, supporting your body from the heart out through circulation, blood flow, blood pressure, and energy. Results you can feel, science you can trust. Get started today at livehuman.com.
I wish I could just watch live sports at home for a great price.
Choose and customize your channel lineup, or pause and watch for free. Sling lets you do that. Base package required.
Derriere, caboose, booty, badunkadunk. No matter what you call it, if you have hemorrhoids, your tushy is no laughing matter. So don't use a cream that treats your rear end like a joke. Get serious relief with Recticare Advanced Hemorrhoidal Cream. Recticare Advanced is seriously effective with 2 powerful medicines for rapid dual-action relief, soothing the uncomfortable swelling, itching, and pain of your hemorrhoids. For serious hemorrhoid relief for your buns, get Recticare Advanced.
At Bright Star Care, our nurse-led care anticipates needs before they are voiced. We'll be there.
Pick up. Joe, pick up the phone. Open up, man.
Connection saves lives. Reach out and check in on a loved one today.
There are only a few men I'd trust with my life. 2 of them built this wallet. I've known the guys behind Proof for nearly 20 years, and we've been through hell and back together. When they told me they were building the wallet, I just said, bill me now, I'm in. This isn't some fashion piece. This isn't just some trend. These wallets are a direct reflection of the kind of men who built it. It's built to last, built to function, and designed to carry everything you need and more. If anything happens to it, they'll take care of it. No questions, no fine print. If you knew the guys who created this wallet, you wouldn't carry anything else. Go check them out, because they built this thing right.
The Keepsake Frames app makes it ridiculously easy to frame your favorite photos. Just choose a photo that you love, select the perfect frame, and you'll have your framed print delivered and ready to hang. Download the free Keepsake Frames app and start framing today.
Guys, stop what you're doing and head over to Fabletics, because right now everything is 80% off. That's right, everything, including their all-new Dawn pant, the pants that feel and look better than jeans. The lightweight, do-it-all one short and jogger. The training, Performance Tech Fundamental Short, lined, unlined, and inseam options. Shirts, tees, polos, 80% off. Shorts, pants, joggers, 80% off. Gym, office, golf, 80% off. Whatever you need, Fabletics has it. Get 80% off everything right now when you sign up as a new VIP, only at fabletics.com.
Doctors' Preferred Liver Defense is doctor-developed to support your natural detox function with clinically validated, triple-tested key ingredients to energize and renew your liver. Find Liver Defense in the supplement aisle at Walmart. Doctors' Preferred. Better science, better results.
Ringing in the new year by making America healthy again. Starting today, Americans in 5 states who receive government SNAP benefits will see restrictions on junk food, including soda and candy. Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Utah, and West Virginia are the first to enact waivers prohibiting the purchase of certain unhealthy foods through SNAP. It's a huge win for Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in his efforts to reduce chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes associated with sugary food and drinks. Senator Roger Marshall, who is also a doctor, joins us now. Thank you for being with us. You know, I personally like to keep government about as far away as possible from my life choices, but I'm really torn on this one because better health is such a positive outcome. How big a win is this for MAHA? And do you think more states are following suit?
Yeah, well, hi, Edie, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers as well. But I think it's a great step forward. Look, we're not telling them they can't purchase those sugary drinks and candy with their own money. But if we're going to use government dollars, let's use it to help make people healthy again. 70% of Americans have a chronic disease. Leading the way is obesity and the type 2 diabetes. So I think these are great steps, complement the governors in these states. I know in Indiana, that they're doing a great job there with Governor Braun. One of my good friends is there. And by the way, congratulations to the Indiana Hoosiers for a great victory tonight.
Well, the Make America Healthy Again movement has a packed agenda in the new year. The Food and Drug Administration's deputy commissioner said one of the goals for the year includes promoting the healthy foods, minimizing consumption of ultra-processed food, removing additives and artificial dyes. What else do you hope to see?
Well, one of the things that we got passed is getting whole milk back into school lunches. We expect President Trump to sign that bill as well. I think it's what we have to do now is kind of define what ultra-processed foods are, that we need to focus not just on the calories of intake, but on the quality of each one of those foods that we're eating as well. So I think we'll be reviewing the dietary guidelines and, again, trying to get back to whole foods where your entire gut is digesting those foods and having good, healthy bacteria inside your own gut where that can lead to a more healthy body.
You know, you just made a great point, and it reminded me of Christmas dinner. Ultra-processed foods, like what in the heck is that? We were making cookies, and I said to my daughter, oh, you're using red food dye? I don't think that's good for you. And she said, really? And I realized she was so young that she probably doesn't remember, everybody talking about that. So I think a lot of people are confused by, not sugary drinks and that, but a lot of things, is this good for me or not? Is that going to be explained better?
I think we have a lot of work to do. Education is real important here. I think we need to start by defining what ultra-processed foods are. The FDA has a responsibility to say, is red dye healthy? Is it not? What other ingredients are there out there? But all I can tell you is if it comes from nature and you don't process it anyway, that's probably what the best way to consume it is. But if it's loaded with salts and sugars, that's not going to be healthy for you. I had so many patients that all they gave up were sodas and potato chips, and they lost 20 or 30 pounds. So let's start with those very, very simple things. And again, if grandma grew it in her garden, it's probably healthy for you.
Yeah. President Trump, by the way, facing relentless scrutiny from liberals. They constantly accuse him of looking sick, not healthy enough to perform his presidential duties. He spoke to the Wall Street Journal about his constant need to defend his physical and mental health, doing extra texting just to prove that he's healthy. But he now says he regrets undergoing the advanced imaging because it triggered more criticism. What's your response?
Well, President Trump is 79 going on 50. He's absolutely the hardest working person I've ever met in my lifetime. He calls me, he texts me at 11 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock the next morning. He knows if I had a hit on Newsmax tonight or not. He'll let me know if I did a good job or not. So I think he's in incredible health. If there's a scale of 0 to 10 of health of presidents, I would have probably put Joe Biden's about a -1. The auto pin at 2 and President Trump at 15. I think he's in incredible health, having worked with him on a regular basis. Just one of the sharpest, hardest working person I've ever met in my lifetime.
Okay. Senator Roger Marshall, thank you very much. And again, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
The Clooneys move from Hollywood and officially become French citizens. So why does Georges have a bee in his bonnet about the leadership at an American broadcasting network? That's next in News from the Left.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Used daily, dermatologist recommended Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream can help restore your skin's natural barrier and reduce the appearance of bruises. If you have mature skin and bruise easily, get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle and get back to having way too much fun.
Don't kibble your dog.
Oh, hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
But what's wrong with this? It's premium stuff.
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means it's ultra-processed at extremely high temperatures that destroy the nutrients in the food. But at Dr. Marty, we gently freeze-dried premium meats, fruit, and vegetables, locking in their nutrients.
Never kibbled.
You got it, kid, and they're gonna love it.
Hungry Root is here. And I needed it because my fridge is super empty.
It's so easy to just whip together a quick, healthy meal.
Head to hungryroot.com for healthy groceries and simple recipes. Plus, get free veggies for life.
Muddy paws, dirty shoes, and endless cleaning. Your floors never stay clean. Meet Muddy Mat, the ultra-absorbent microfiber mat that traps dirt instantly.
Dog parents, this is a must-have.
My floors have never been so clean. You just place the Muddy Mat in front of the door and you'll save up so much time cleaning the floors. Go get one. Thank me later.
Call or go to trymuddymat.com or scan the QR code on the screen to claim your 70% off and get your free Muddy Mat today.
My dad has never been in better shape. He had a stroke and passed away. But he did an incredible thing for my family. Ethos.com. In 10 minutes, you can be covered with life insurance.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
Think of all the places that could expose you to identity theft.
If something happens, LifeLock provides a U.S.-based restoration specialist to fix it start to finish, guaranteed or your money back. Don't face identity theft alone. Join LifeLock today.
The grind catches up with everyone, even me. That's why I trust Cunol Ultra High Absorption Turmeric to support my joint health. It's the #1 doctor-recommended form of turmeric that helps you keep doing the things you love at every age. Cunol, the brand I trust.
WSOP presents the NFL Poker Experience. Rep your team. Compete in exciting NFL tournaments. Win exclusive NFL Poker Championship rings and collect cards to complete the NFL albums. Download the WSOP free-to-play app for a chance to win $1,000 towards your favorite team merchandise.
It's time now for news from the left. George Clooney making major headlines during the 2024 presidential election after chatting up President Biden at a fundraiser and telling everyone to support him. He then conveniently changed his tune after that disastrous debate and made it obvious that George either didn't know what he was talking about or he was lying. And an about-face, he penned a blistering New York Times op-ed bluntly stating that President Biden couldn't defeat Trump because of his cognitive decline. But that's all in the past for now. And for the Oscar-winning actor, George and his wife Amal are now citizens of France. Maybe they'll call him George over there. Despite the move, Clooney is very worried that CBS will no longer align with the other broadcast networks in spewing leftist ideological beliefs, telling Variety that the new CBS editor-in-chief, Barry Weiss, was dismantling the network as we speak, stating, "My primary loyalty is with my country. I'm much more worried about how we inform ourselves and how we're going to discern reality without a functioning press." Not sure what country he was talking about. Weiss responding to Clooney saying, "Bonjour, Mr. Clooney. Big fan of your work. It sounds like you'd like to learn more about ours. This is an open invitation to visit the CBS Broadcast Center, where I'm spending the holidays working to relaunch the evening news with my colleagues. Tune in January 5th. Trump also celebrating George Clooney's French citizenship, posting on Truth Social saying, "Good news. George Clooney and Amal Clooney, two of the worst political prognosticators of all time, have officially become citizens of France." Then he adds, "Remember when Clooney, after the now infamous debate, dumped Joe during a fundraiser only to go on to the side of another stellar candidate, Jamala? Clooney got more publicity for politics than he ever did for his very few and totally mediocre movies. He wasn't a movie star at all. He was just an average guy who complained constantly about common sense politics." Eric Scheiner, Senior Director, MRC TV, Bill D'Agostino, Senior Research Analyst for the Media Research Center, join us now. So, Eric, first, your thoughts on the Clooneys fleeing to become French citizens?
Well, you know, the French are known for surrendering, and who sorted up Joe Biden better than George Clooney, right? When he penned that op-ed. Yeah, I mean, George Clooney might be the strongest leader the Democratic Party has right now, especially in the eyes of the media. I mean, he got them to change horses in the middle of the race. I'm not surprised. Barry Weiss's comeback troll was very interesting, saying, "Hey, you know, come on down and visit us," because you know George isn't going to do it because he doesn't want to have his vision proven wrong. So he's not going to come and visit and have his vision proven false. And then she can say, "Hey, I invited you, you didn't come." So it's a great troll by her. And not surprising that George Clooney suddenly, he doesn't want to raise his kids in Hollywood. That seems like a very normal decision. He realized that Joe Biden wasn't cognitively there. Very normal decision, despite what the media was telling us at the time. So he surrendered. He's gone to France, where, you know, they're kind of known for that.
Bill, what's confusing me is why does Clooney even care about CBS if he's living in France now?
Well, it's kind of the pastime of the left to moan and cry about literally anything that is not adhering to their beliefs, right? I mean, George Clooney is, like, make no mistake, he's going to spend all of his time in France consuming American media about American politics. Right. I don't think that he knows much of anything about France's politics. I don't think he cares to. He's basically just doing a trumped up virtue signal here, a la Rosie O'Donnell. Right. That's basically what this is. So he is very much still invested in America, and he's still going to care about literally anything that breaks ranks with the entire wall of left wing media hegemony. So CBS is basically a problem area for him because they're actually reporting on some things that, hey, might make Democrats look bad once in a while.
Eric, I want to stick with CBS. Tony Dokoupil declaring that he's going to start reporting for you because no one trusts the legacy media anymore. Watch.
People do not trust us like they used to. And it's not just us, it's all of legacy media. So here's my promise to you. Today and every time you see me in this chair, you come first. Not advertisers, not politicians, not corporate interests. And yes, that does include the corporate owners of CBS. I report for you.
Oh, how sweet. So what do you make of this, Tony?
Well, we got to give him a chance, right? We'll see how he performs in the future, but you have to take his past into consideration. This is a guy that in 2020 took out a bunch of pieces of pie and showed several slices of what Americans were getting and argued that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were going to redistribute that pie. And of course, redistribution of wealth. Oh, well, surprise, surprise, Elizabeth Warren sang his praises. So we're going to have to see. He doesn't have the greatest record. We'll see how it goes forward. It was also interesting that CBS sent him out to, I believe, a subway station in New York to have people try to enunciate his last name. And when they couldn't, he introduced himself as saying, well, I'm going to be the new CBS anchor. I'm going to be filling in. I'm going to be taking over. But he didn't mention John Dickerson, the person he's filling in for. He went back into history. So it's like he wants to ignore what CBS has been in the last few years and try to establish his own thing. So we'll give him a chance going forward, but I can't say that he has the greatest track record.
Yeah. Plus, it strikes me as a good journalist, you should never have to tell people, I'll report for you. That should be your instinct automatically, not corporate interests. Anyway, Bill, it seems that Bari Weiss is very serious about this dramatic shift she envisions for CBS. Do you think she can accomplish it?
I think that she is slowly accomplishing what she's able to accomplish. I mean, everybody remembers when Chris Licht took over CNN, and some of the, let's say, overly optimistic among us were saying this is it. CBS is going to get good now. And he fired like 3 people. He fired John Harwood, Brian Stelter, Don Lemon. And as far as I can tell, and it's my job to watch them. So I'm unfortunately too familiar with this. CBS still kind of, or CNN still kind of sucks today. Right. So, I mean, that he didn't really accomplish a whole lot. As far as what Bari Weiss is doing, I think she's got a lot more of a systematic approach, where she's kind of coming in and actually looking at individual reports and the work of individual reporters and policing them back into a range of journalistic standards that she considers acceptable. Because as of right now, there's basically no broadcast journalist that would pass a journalism test if it was a fair one. I would say, though, Tony Dokoupil has been having a little bit of a redemption arc himself over the past couple of years. He seems to have sort of thrown off the shackles of trying to appease a rabidly liberal audience once he got criticized for taking it a little bit too aggressively to Ta-Nehisi Coates during an interview about October 7th. And since then, he's become a bit more open to not necessarily overtly right-wing thinking, but certainly entertaining the idea that, hey, maybe the Republicans aren't always wrong, or hey, maybe the Democrats aren't always correct. So I think that his actually taking on evening news is a good sign.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric Scheiner and Bill D'Agostino. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, questioning, what is everyone's New Year's resolution for 2026? That is next.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
He's breathing. Okay, go again.
Nearly 5,000 people die from choking each year. That's frightening. I'm Dr. Ben Carson.
And I'm Arthur Lee. Well, there are ways to help prevent choking. Accidents do happen. That's why I invented the Life Pack.
Anyone can use this device, and it can save a life in seconds.
Just place, push, and pull. It's that simple. Please order one for your home, office, car, anywhere you eat.
Go to lifepack.net or call 877-543-3822.
It's time to celebrate with Omaha Steaks end-of-season event. For a limited time, we're offering 50% off site-wide. That's 50% off all your favorites, like our Butcher's Classic Assortment, including our USDA certified tender filet mignon and top sirloin fillets, plus chicken, pork chops, desserts, and more, all for just $99.99. Plus, you'll get 8 burgers free when you visit omahasteaks.com/TV today.
Doctor's Preferred Liver Defense is doctor-developed to support your natural detox function with clinically validated, triple-tested key ingredients to energize and renew your liver. Find Liver Defense in the supplement aisle at Walmart. Doctor's Preferred. Better science, better results.
I lost 110 pounds. You couldn't tell at all because of my excess skin. Sono Bello changed that in one visit.
Introducing the new Lift EX, the just one visit, total body transformation everyone is talking about.
I am super happy with my results.
I decided to give Sono Bello a try. Look at me, I have a silhouette. You can see my waist.
Lift EX is Sono Bello's breakthrough 360-degree body lift alternative. Our body contouring experts sculpt, tighten, and lift your stomach, waist, thighs, and backside, all in just one visit with less downtime.
Sono Bello targeted the areas diet exercise could not do. I found me again.
Sono Bello has over 50,000 5-star reviews, and Lift EX is exclusively available at Sono Bello, America's #1 cosmetic surgery specialist. Book your free, personalized consultation today. Easy monthly plans make your best body more affordable than ever.
This year is my year thanks to Sono Bello.
Call Sono Bello for your free consultation today.
This is Fubo. It's a better way to watch ESPN and other top sports networks. Plus, get coverage of your local teams all year long. Start watching at FuboTV.com.
Oh no! Our water line broke. It could cost a fortune to get a contractor to come fix it, and it's not covered by homeowners insurance.
That's why you should have HomeServe.
It's Tom Merson, CEO of HomeServe.
When your water line breaks, HomeServe sends a qualified contractor to fix it and pays for the covered repairs.
With HomeServe, the American dream of owning a home doesn't need to be a nightmare.
Plans from HomeServe start at just $4.99 a month.
Call 1-833-559-6598 or visit homeserve.com.
This is the story of the one who knows well-prepared workdays take off smoothly and land right on time. That's why he counts on Grainger. With next-day delivery and professional-grade products, Grainger helps ensure he, his crew, and thousands of passengers fly through the day like clockwork. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The new year officially beginning today. Many Americans thinking about their New Year's resolutions, launching new habits, achieving new goals. Statista revealing the top 3 resolutions that Americans have this year. At number 1, 48% of participants said they wanted to hit the gym more this year. I tried that one. I got dressed every morning in my gym clothes. And after a couple of weeks, a friend said, wow, you work out a lot. And I had to admit I still hadn't made it to the gym yet. So I'm skipping that one. At number 2, 46% said that they want to save more money. Good resolution. And at number 3, survey respondents are hoping to eat more home-cooked meals next year at 45%. President Trump was also asked last night at Mar-a-Lago what his New Year's resolution is. And here was his response.
Do you have a New Year's resolution?
Peace on earth. How can you disagree with that? We would all like to see that. My resolution this year now, not to do the exercise, but to learn how to make my own tamales. Then I'll have to exercise afterwards. Thank you all for watching tonight. I'm Edie Hill. Finnerty is next. Have a great weekend and a Happy New Year.